Hi, I'm Anne Russell and I'm reading chapter 13, and this is called The Fair Selection. So while each child with FASD is unique, the following is a typical comparison between Year 3 school-aged neurotypical children and children with FASD. So I'm not sure quite how to read this out so that it's best understood. So the neurotypical student, they listen attentively and share ideas. They give information in groups, class discussions or presentations to other classes and in assemblies. For example, they can talk about familiar topics such as birthdays, sport, family, friends, and then they begin to read texts on less familiar topics. Now, this is the child with FASD, the student rather. So memory confounds their ability to remember lengthy instructions. They need short, concrete instructions. They have verbal competency with immature content. They're overly chatty, but with little substance. Difficultly follow instructions, slow to process language, overly literal. Their reading is poor, with later problems in comprehension. Now, the neurotypical student makes inferences, begins to summarise events and makes predictions when reading stories to develop comprehension. They begin to organise ideas into paragraphs when writing, and they use basic grammatical features and punctuation conventions. The student with FASD, their spelling is poor. There is likely to be difficulty when attempting to write creatively, particularly when describing feelings, experiences and emotions. The neurotypical student will construct texts featuring print, visual and audio elements using software, including the use of digital technologies. They can tell time to the quarter hour, and they can count and read and write numbers to 1,000. A student with FASD, will find that abstract concepts will cause problems for the student, who will be unlikely to make inferences or draw conclusions based on an idea or a concept. They'll have problems telling time, particularly on an analogue clock. The neurotypical student models division using concrete objects. For example, 6 divided by 3 is the same as sharing 6 objects into 3 equal groups. The student with FASD will find that maths, which appears maths which appears abstractions difficult to find. Anyway, they will find maths very difficult and abstractions will be very difficult to understand. The neurotypical student can compare and order the area of 2 or more surfaces. They can use a calendar to calculate the number of months, weeks or days until an upcoming event. They can understand and draw graphs and diagrams of data. For example, they use simple picture graphs and tables. They can count forwards and backwards by 2s, 3s and 5s. Yet the student with FASD may not be able to complete any of these tasks accurately. So you can understand how kids in school and how teachers find it very, very difficult to manage children with FASD. Obviously, not all learning difficulties will be the result of prenatal alcohol exposure. Nevertheless, in the case of my boys, it was clear to me this was the reason for both leaving school in Year 9. Being bullied and bullying others, along with consistently inappropriate behaviour, his difficulty making and keeping friends, and regular suspension and truancy would not have helped him feel cemented to the school. Seth's teachers frequently requested interviews with Don and me, but because Don often worked away from home, I attended alone, almost always hearing the same comments from his teachers. He's disruptive. He fidgets in class. He disrupts other children. He doesn't try hard enough. He has the intelligence. He just doesn't seem to want to use it. Lastly, the ubiquitous could do better. I heard these comments over and over again without any suggestions on how we might help him improve. Only a few years ago, I had questioned both boys about their impression of their childhood. Mick was clear that his childhood couldn't have been better, and he didn't ever think of me as an alcoholic, and he was happy. So at the moment of writing this book, not right now, but I'm writing this book, Seth was 33 in 2017, and while Dr. Ed Riley's hypothesis is that at this age things may turn around for people with FASD, for us things just seem to have become worse. It's very hard to know when to quit, when is enough enough. When to back off and let society with its current mismanagement of FASD take over. The systems are broken. Of course, when I ask these questions of myself, even in moments of utter weariness and exhaustion and despair, the only answer that ever comes back to me is never. But is that the right thing to do? Is it right to help him until we die, leaving him all alone, all at once? Or is it better to have him compulsorily connected to services long before that happens? Additionally, is it right that almost every spare dollar that we had went into supporting him one way or another? So Seth was in agreement with Mick, but generally responses to questions of this nature depend on how he's feeling at the time, the time the question's asked. If he's happy, he had a happy childhood. If he's miserable, he had a miserable childhood. Knowing that his impressions are based in the now alleviated a portion of the fear I experienced whenever Seth and I spoke about his childhood. My fear was directly connected to the possibility that Seth felt negatively about his childhood. If he were to tell me that he had an unhappy childhood, I would be devastated. Of course, he did have an unhappy childhood, but it wasn't related to my parenting per se. It was related to the fact that we were completely ignorant that he had a cognitive impairment. From puberty onwards, our expectations of each other were unrealistic. For him, it was about finances. Regardless of how much money we had given him in the way of cars, rent, bond, repairs, clothes, cigarettes, and eventually drugs, he always wanted more. He didn't seem to have any idea how much money went into helping him overcome his life hurdles. I had created parameters, boundaries, used natural justice and tough love to no avail, and my failures kept me awake at night. I was never sure if he would hurt me, but as he grew in stature, so did his anger. I became wary of his moods and learned to predict how far he would go before I needed to back off and change subjects. This gap narrowed as he grew older, so the angrier Seth became, the calmer I needed to be. Otherwise, the situation would escalate into roaring and dangerous rages. As perseveration became more difficult for him to manage, he came to be less responsive to the distraction techniques that worked when he was younger. And I have to say now, while I'm reading this in August 2021, that he is the most amazing person. He is considerate, kind, thoughtful, willing to help. I don't think there are words to describe him. He's just amazing. And this is not just a mother talking. I've been very clear about the issues that we've had as he grew up. But now, it's very hard to... He's actually 37 now. And he's absolutely amazing. So there is hope. There is absolutely hope for our kids. So before he was accurately diagnosed, this behaviour was extraordinarily confusing for all of us. Don and I rarely fought and certainly had never engaged in the physical or verbal intimidation or abuse Seth seemed to feel was such a necessary part of his interaction with us. Don believed it was his duty to try and stop Seth and would step in, using firm, loud comments, which further escalated the situation. When Seth was diagnosed and I understood more about perseveration, I was able to monitor his moods and react in a more appropriate manner. If distraction didn't work, I tried changing the subject if we could. If nothing else worked, we removed ourselves from the situation. When we learned more about FASD, we modified our expectations. A better plan that worked well in combination with the others. Perseveration is often connected to FASD. It's commonly described as some form of repetitive behaviour, such as tapping feet, knocking, or pacing. It may also manifest as a particularly rigid way of thinking, a refusal to let go of an idea, or a certain way of feeling or interpreting a feeling, or refusal to consider an alternative explanation. Trying to talk a person out of whatever it is they're perseverating on will often make the situation worse. They may be unable to let go of their idea, no matter the type or length of those negative consequences, and at the same time are unable to see any other possibilities. So this perseveration might be in relation to, somebody might have mentioned that, on the weekend we'll go swimming. That will be the thing, or that could be the thing that they perseverate on. So for the previous week, it's always, when are we going swimming? They know it's the weekend, but today is what's important for them. So that will be a continuing, if they're perseverating, it'll be a continuing theme throughout the week, and it will drive parents crazy. So it's best not to say things like, on the weekend, if the weather is fine, we'll go swimming, because it will be reduced in their mind to, we will go swimming. The fact that it was on the weekend or only if the weather's fine won't factor in. So be careful when looking into the future. So I think this is a fairly long chapter, so I'll stop here and we'll do the next video with the second half of chapter 12, which is, I've forgotten already, the fair selection. That's what it's called. Thank you very much.